Hello, and welcome to ESG Talk. I'm your go-to source for insights and advice for leaders in environment, social, and governance. I'm your host, Mandi McReynolds. I'm delighted to bring to you today a wonderful colleague, friend, and teacher at heart, Denise Roberson. Denise is the Chief Purpose Officer at TBWA Chiat, and we have a friendly debate all the time around values versus value. And if you're on YouTube, you just saw her shake her hands because this is one of our favorite topics. How do you create it? What are the ways you think about this relationship as it relates to financial purpose and future purposing your business? We think about values a little bit more nuanced. It's a little hard to understand when we hold up the word purpose. Denise is shaking her head. The idea of values in context can be closely shared with the company's mission and the questions of what is material, what is most important to your business. And of course, when we think about value, we have to think about the financial opportunities, cost, and risk to your company. So Denise, welcome to the show. I'm excited that we get to bring this conversation live to our viewers all around the world in 90 plus countries.
Thank you, Mandi. This is so exciting. I am so eagerly awaiting this conversation, so I'm glad we could finally have it. And before we get started, congratulations. I just saw that you were one of the 50 top ESG influencers on a list that had some serious people there, so high five. Pretty awesome to see.
Well, thank you for that. Very, very humbled. And as you know me, I look at the list and say, it's not about one person on the list. It's the collective list that is making the power. And so delighted to see 50 names. I look forward to that list being 100 names. That's
absolutely.
So let's dig in there. Let's go there.
Okay.
Why do you believe companies should lead with values in order to deliver impact to society?
Okay, so a little bit of table setting first, and I'm going to just go right for the conclusion, which is I actually do see value and values as two parts to a whole. But in this scenario, I think it's really important to define what type of values we're talking about, and that's values that are material to the organization. And I think that's an important point because we can get lost on that word. Values. It can take people in a lot of different directions, but in this particular context, it's values that are material to the organization. And I think the reason we're starting to see things like purpose and ESG accelerating is the ability company stakeholders have to make stronger, more well-informed decisions that take into account the social and environmental context the company's actually operating in. So these values should ladder up to the company's purpose. And that should be used for decision-making that results in value creation. So purpose is half protecting against risk, half growth and innovation. So the values are really serving as the foundation for this entire process.
And I think it's a good point that there is that look or that lens around values having that strong foundation. Even if I look at Workiva's own strategy for ESG, it is underpinned with the values of our company to then go up and deliver both impact to business and society. So you're operating in your core principles of your heart, but you're driving the growth of your business, both from a financial perspective and societal impact perspective with that there. So I think we agree there. Where I think we may see a little bit difference is I think there has to be that focus on business value at some point, because you're going to have to make those decisions a little more clearly that how do these values translate to a value? Otherwise, you can end up facing a lot of things.
So I would say that's the number one question I get asked daily. Is this soft and fuzzy? Does this equal anything? Is this a loss center? I get those questions daily. So you're not the only one that holds that belief.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit, because you've done some really good work with companies around measuring their purpose, around looking at these opportunities. Tell us a little bit more, because I also know that's part of your research background too.
Yeah, so because of this notion that purpose in particular, and when we refer to purpose, it's looking at how these material values ladder up into something that I'm calling a purpose statement. And I think oftentimes there are two camps. There's a camp that just immediately sees, the pretty stick, the soft and fuzzy, that side of purpose. And then there are the folks that are like, okay, talk me through the business case. What is that material business case to us? And that's what we really try to get very specific on. How do we bring that to life in a meaningful way that serves all stakeholders? And that's an interesting way for the C-suite that's been in business for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and the board of directors that could not have possibly come up through their ranks with that as one of the core levers that you can pull within an organization. So making sure we've got something that is measurable and we're measuring what matters, making sure that we are tracking with the right KPIs attached, making sure we're authenticating this based on a business case and not just what feels good, I think is one of the most important things we can bring to an organization to really legitimize this. The other is this notion that they have to be candid in a way they never have before. So bringing that sense of authenticity, talking about good and the bad, because that's part of the journey. Nobody flips a switch and just travels this path seamlessly. So being comfortable, being vulnerable, being able to talk about both success and failures, I think is another interesting way that takes a lot of coaching and getting comfortable with, because most organizations only talk about the wins. And I think in this scenario, you have to talk about both.
That's a really good point of the authenticity and transparency beyond the wins, because you and I are both truth tellers. And as we look out at society as a whole and a global society, there is this big debate that's going on around performance. And could ESG, could purpose actually drive performance or not drive performance? And where is that financial fiduciary responsibility of a company, and or if you look at investors, of an investment portfolio that's happening? Do you think this is distracting from the purpose and the benefit and the values? What's your pulse on that?
You're going to get an academic response for this one because I'm a glass half full type of gal. It absolutely is becoming a distraction. Yes, I see that, but it's also putting purpose in ESG into mainstream conversations, and it's allowing more people to consider it from various positions and industries that we haven't heard from yet. So I think it's interesting to put this debate forward, but I think it can also be quite destructive. If we look at, something like tangible assets, it used to account for 80% of value back in the 70s. And now that's shrunk way down into something around 10% today. So a lot of these intangible values, it's related to ESG metrics, purpose, and brand value. So that's one way something like Apple became $1 trillion company. But make no mistake, some of these tectonic shifts we're seeing in business today are a result of customers, employees, investors, governments' values changing. And it's throughout these crises we've all faced. So there's too much data and research for my particular taste to look at these trend lines and just say they're false. That's it. I cannot believe these. But I do think these false rhetoric means we're getting closer to these things becoming mainstream in an organization, and that change scares our critics.
Well, and I appreciate the insightful thinking there, and it's okay to have that thoughtful, embedded in research response, because it's the data and the truth that can drive you forward to decision useful opportunity. And so I like how you're thinking about that as we think about the noise in the market and look at opportunities for us to say, okay, let's get down to 10% truth. like in all the noise, where's the 10% truth in what's happening here? So let's talk about examples where you've seen values and value clash, and how should companies approach that friction? Because you said, they have to see it more than an opportunity center. They have to make some kind of cost investment. There could be some loss. Tell us more about that.
Mandi, that's a great question. And one of the things I never want to do is sugarcoat that this is easy and somehow this is a linear, straightforward path that has no obstacles. So I love that you're asking questions about that. Those are questions that I get daily. And oftentimes when I come into an organization, there are discrepancies between the personal values of a CEO or founder and the material business values. And that's when things start to go awry. This can lead to the company down a path that's perceived as that soft and fuzzy thing we were talking about, where it's not quite hitting at the business value of things. And once that disconnects from the company's strengths and resources and products, people, innovations, all those good things, there's danger on the horizon. And this could actually be harmful to organizations. It's important to take a step back, analyze the business value that they connect to in their daily activities and the resource base of the company. Then hold up that purpose lens to ensure that each decision is in service of fulfilling it. That's the one way to build real value. When too many things disconnect, they'll truly collapse. I think we can see this argument again, something similar anyway, in short-termism versus that long-term thinking. When organizations feel pressure to create value that is decoupled from its values, it can be very unsustainable.
Can you maybe break that down to one practical example that you've seen that could help our visual for viewers to kind of visualize that?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, again, the CEO or founders come to the table with a lot of their own values, and those may or may not be directed at the business value. Once those things are decoupled, it takes us in a really bad direction, because it's not that the CEO having values is bad, it's a great thing. But if it's not material business value, it can really take us down a path that almost could look like the company's greenwashing, they're doing false things. It can be a very dangerous situation. So I always say, take a step back, reconnect to the organization itself. What are its strengths? What are is it people? Is it technology? Find your epicenter and reconnect to it in a very deep and meaningful way. Then make sure you hold up your purpose lens. It's two parts to a whole. You can't have one without the other. And make sure that you're making decisions in service of fulfilling it. That's really where we get our best stuff that leads to true business value.
One of the things that I appreciate about our founder, Marty, is he's an environmentalist, like incredibly passionate about the environment. And he does a lot in his personal life around the environment, has prairie lands and restoration lands. And I think about that example where it's easy for a company who could then start chasing that as opportunity from philanthropy, from innovation, from other places. But that isn't necessarily our superpower.
Right.
What is our superpower? Building more transparency in the world, because when things step into the light, then companies and businesses operate better. So where does Workiva, as somebody who is about financial and risk reporting, have the opportunity to make a difference? And it's building that ESG product for our customers around the world, building transparency around the world, helping them have data-driven decisions around the world.
Yes.
So that we can better the world as a whole. And that's using your superpower and your values. And yes, does that mean still, like, if you come to our headquarter campus that I'm in today, beautiful trees, like there's
Right.
so many wonderful things.
No question, no question about it.
What is both the values with the value. And I think that's a good example of, you can have a CEO have a passion, but it has to align. It has to align.
That's it. If you want to create business value, it must align. Once these things start disconnecting from each other, it becomes dilute, it becomes confusing. I have many CEOs that have done the same, and we try to feed that passion. We try to find them projects outside of the organization they can participate in. But when it comes to the business, that level of focus is what allows you to get crystal clear in telling your story and bringing more value to the organization.
So over the next few years, we know that ESG is posed for rapid expansion, and regardless of where our listeners may be, whether they lean more towards the value side versus the values side, a company's ability to communicate their strategy with transparency, with consistency, with accuracy is more important now than it ever was before, as all these stakeholders are looking to companies. What is one major change you think companies need to consider to demonstrate the values that can translate to value?
I love this question again, because I started getting very regulatory and started looking at all those nuances. But I chose not to go in that direction. So go with me on this one. But what I see so often where companies get it wrong is they feel like they have to address all of the problems in the world, everything all at once, kind of like this Oscar-nominated film. And boy, does it not serve them well. And I feel like besides being impossible, it creates a lack of cohesion and connectivity that makes their efforts feel chaotic, untrustworthy, all these negative things that we're not trying to do. So this is where having a strong purpose that's built from material values adds focus and the ability to tell a compelling story that really enhances the company's credibility and meaning and ultimately its value. So my recommendation is don't get overwhelmed and try and boil the ocean. Focus, get comfortable with the various frameworks and reporting agencies. Use them to create this virtuous feedback loops of measuring what matters in a transparent, consistent, and accurate way. I love that you said that. This will help you feel more comfortable in communicating your company's ESG journey and in a really authentic way, good and bad. And don't feel like you have to go it alone and be an expert right out of the gate. It's okay to hire consultants. It's okay to bring new types of talent on board to do this in a way that's meaningful and to build that foundation strong.
And I couldn't agree with you more. The other piece that I would say is I'm on this mission, and I don't know about you. Like when I look at materiality assessments now and I see 20 or 30 dots on a grid, you're shaking your head. I'm like, that's not priority. That is nowhere near prioritization of what's going to drive value. That to me is evidence of confusion. And
Absolutely.
that to me is evidence of a lack of focus. Where, to your point, are you even going to be able to say how your values can come to life through value? And I think if you start to use what you're talking about, the purpose and the values as a filter, those topics are going to come way in. They're going to get really laser focused. And it's okay to have, 10, because a lot of ESG priorities are long term. And so like for me, it's like, it's okay to have an upper quadrant.
Absolutely. I recently started with a new organization, and though they're an old company that's been around a long time, this is new to them in reporting this way. And I said, okay, we got to the SDG part. Mm-hmm. What are we going to approach? Well, all of them. All 17 SDGs, all at once, all of them? And they looked at me with a straight face and said, well, yes, they're all important to us. And I said, okay, stop. Mm-hmm. They can all be important to you, but we have to focus because I can pick out 4 or 5 right now that is not material to this organization and the resources you guys bring to the table, your superpowers. And they looked at me like, well, aren't we supposed to be talking about all of them? Are we not doing this right? And it was so interesting to me because it wasn't being done out of malice. It was being done out of this forthright, like, don't we have to talk about all 17? And the answer is no, you do not. And when we were done with weeks worth of work and workshopping, they could see so clearly themselves and these new goals that they had set and this new approach that they were going after that was much smaller than they had ever anticipated, but much more meaningful as a result.
Well, this conversation went incredibly fast. 2 wonderful friends, colleagues, truth tellers, and I just appreciate for you, your leadership in the field, the energy you bring, and as you work with companies to translate values into value. So thank you for all that you do in the field. And as we finish out, I want to remind our audience that we truly can't separate the two. That's what we hope you walk away from, that purpose versus performance isn't what you have to sacrifice. So when we talk about this on ESG, we really want for you to understand that sustainability is going to be your license to operate, and bringing the two together is what's going to create a bottom line for your company. So thank you, Denise, for your time. For our audience watching and listening all over the globe, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Share it with your friends. We'd love to have the conversation continue. Feel free to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Let's all talk real soon.